Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse every Thursday and share it as the Madlik podcast on your favorite platform. This week's parsha is Vayera. Over 250,000 innocent civilians have been displaced since the advent of the October 7th war from both the south and north of Israel. Volunteers, non-government organizations, and tech workers who were organizing protests a month ago have taken the lead in welcoming these fugitives and providing all sorts of support, both physical, spiritual, social, and psychological. Today we study a parsha that celebrates the hosting of guests. So join us for Making Place for the Displaced. So, Rabbi, welcome for another week of Madlik that is tied to the matzav, to the situation in Israel. And today I must say that I'm going to be wearing a few hats because, as you know, I am privileged to run an organization that enables U.S. taxpayers to donate money to Israeli charities. We are sending millions and millions and millions of dollars from very generous U.S. donors. But in the process, I am learning, as I've never known before, the ingenuity, the integrity, the dedication, the creativity, and the generosity of Israelis of all religions, of all stripes, who are rising to the occasion and welcoming, as I said in the intro, these displaced people. So I don't think we could study a more opportune and more timely parsha than the one we are today. Hachnasat orchim, welcoming the guests. What do you think?
This is really an appropriate topic. And, you know, we always say that there's no coincidence in terms of the Torah reading. So it must be that this is what they wanted us to be reading this week.
I suppose so. I mean, in these Torah portions, there's so much going on. But I've been stopping at the beginning because I don't have all that much time. But the truth is that last week we focused on one element of Abraham, and it just he seems to be a person, maybe because he is the father of the Abrahamic religions, but if he does something in 4 verses, that creates a character trait that seems to live on. And tonight we're going to be studying both in Judaism, and I will even touch, if I have time, in Islam, this sense of welcoming the guest. So we are in Genesis 18, and as it happens, Abraham has recovering from his circumcision, and it says, God appeared to him by the tabernates of Mamre. He was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the day grew hot. Looking up, he saw 3 figures standing near him. Perceiving this, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them, and, bowing to the ground, he said, My lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Let a little water be brought, bathe your feet, and recline under the tree, and let me fetch a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves, and then go on, seeing that you have come your servant's way. They replied, Do as you have said. Abraham himself hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, Quick, 3 seahs of choice flour, knead and make cakes. Then Abraham ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and choice, and gave it to a servant boy who hastened to prepare it. He took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them, and he waited on them under the tree as they ate. They said to him, Where is your wife Sarah? So I'm going to skip over the next stuff because I am focused like a laser on what Abraham and Sarah did for the guests, not any prophecies of having a child, and not talking about the miracle of birth. I'm going to skip right till the end. In verse 16 it says, the men set out from there and looked down toward Sodom, Abraham walking with them to see them off. For someone who has just had surgery, this guy's kind of busy, wouldn't you say?
It's amazing. I mean, this is the model for what it means to welcome guests. And like always, the model is always an exaggeration. Like he goes far beyond what you would have imagined.
There are times where we need the commentaries to flush something out. I think if you just read this parsha as it is, knowing the context, he clearly had surgery the day before, seeing him sitting, seeing him getting up, seeing him prostrating, seeing him running into the house and going to it's unbelievable, and everything he's doing till the last verse where he accompanies them out as they're going is clearly about welcoming guests. He almost seems like he's at a stall in a bazaar and somebody's walking by and he's almost competing with someone else. He wants that guest. I mean, you don't almost need Rashi, where Rashi says on verse 18 that he was at the tent door. Why? That he might see whether anyone passed by and invite him into the house. Vehachnisam bebeito. This is where we get the word hachnasat orchim. He wanted to invite them into the house. Rashi goes on one more. He says, the heat of the day. The Holy One, blessed be He, brought the sun out of its sheath that he might not be troubled by travelers. He didn't want Abraham lahatwicho ba'orchim. I mean, that's not travelers, it's guests. This was a guy, you want to talk about what his profession was? Seems to be a professional guest monger. And when he perceived that he was grieved that no travelers came, he brought him angels in the form of men. It's almost as though the horse is in front of the cart. This is not about a story of angels coming to prophecy about the birth. These are about angels coming because Abraham, in his pain, in his post-op, is sitting there and dying because there are no guests coming. I mean, this is a picture, if you want to talk about a poster child of someone who welcomes guests, who takes this almost as his line of work. This is how Abraham is painted here. It's really impressive.
Really, really impressive. I mean, that's the Ramban Nachmanides says in last week's parsha that the purpose of all of these stories in the book of Breshit is Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. That the models of our forefathers are what we should follow. So actually, this story of Hachnasat Orchim is put in the Torah, says the Ramban, so that we should follow it.
And the rabbis do. In the Talmud in Shabbat 127a, it says, we learn in the Mishnah, one may move baskets of produce due to the guests, and in order to prevent the suspension of Torah study in the Torah hall. Rabbi Yochanan said, hospitality toward guests is as great as rising early to go to the study hall, as the Mishnah equates them and teaches. Due to the guests and due to suspension of Torah study in the study hall. And Rav Dimi from Nahardai said, hospitality toward guests is greater than rising early to the study hall as it teaches, due to the guests and only afterward due to the suspension of Torah study. Rav said, on a related note, hospitality toward guests is greater than receiving the divine presence, the Shekhinah, as, quoting our story, when Abraham invited his guests, it is written, and he said, Lord, if not now I have found favor in your sight, please pass not from your servant. Starts by saying he was with God, and he gets up and gets the guests to come. But here's something that I found fascinating. Rav Yehuda Bar Shila said, And Rabbi Asi said that Rabbi Yochanan said, there are 6 matters a person enjoys the profits of in this world, and nevertheless the principle exists for him for the world to come. And they are hospitality toward guests, visiting the sick, and consideration during prayer and rising early to the study hall, one who raises his sons to engage in Torah, and one who judges another favorably. So it's interesting that Hachnasat Orachim, welcoming the guests, is on the top of the list. It's the first. And that it puts it in very high categories with others. What is, would you say, Rabbi, is the what role does Hachnasat Orachim play in normative Judaism, in a Jewish person's life? How important is it?
It's very important. I mean, that's one of the fundamentals that every Jew knows. So you have to be welcoming to strangers, welcoming to your friends. And I think you say, how do you know, if you want to talk halachically, legally, how do you know that Hachnasat Orchim is important? I think the answer is that Hachnasat Orchim is an extension of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that you have to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you love your neighbor as yourself means all people, then you will welcome them into your house.
Absolutely. There is a little play here with these strangers that came. Because obviously, wink, wink, we know these strangers are angels. And in a sense, this sense of standing up, even though he's talking to God, and then welcoming these strangers and bowing down, it really does connect in a very profound way that welcoming a guest is like welcoming the Shekhinah. And in a sense, as it says, it's more important than that. But it does connect it with godliness. It does make it a profound experience. And, there are times, Rabbi, that we will go over how many verses in the Torah are there about loving the stranger. And we always talk about the stranger is the person who's different. The stranger is the person who's not like us. But for tonight's purposes, maybe the stranger is the traveler. Maybe the stranger is the person who's just walking by your tent type of thing. In Leviticus 19, it says, when strangers reside with you in your land, you shall not wrong them. The strangers who reside with you shall be as your citizens. I mean, it is a different vantage point to think, what is it like when you are away from your home? Not permanently. Maybe you're not a permanent refugee. Maybe you're not a landless, strange, different person. Maybe you're just dispossessed. Maybe you're just traveling. But I think if to look at it through the lens that we're looking at today, where these are angels coming just from another place, it's welcoming someone who right now is away from home and giving them a home.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's a nice twist of it. But, what you're really saying is that, welcoming guests, it means different things in different contexts. And it could be that today you're not a guest, but tomorrow, for whatever reason, you need to be a guest. And the mitzvah therefore applies to you. And of course, that's, that's something that we've been reminded of the past 3 weeks. And the fact that, people who are so set and so, so stable, all of a sudden need hachnasat orchim. And that's something we have to keep in mind.
I love it. I love the fact that the way you positioned it is one day you can be a resident, and tomorrow you can be a traveler. We can all, it's like when you drive a car and you get pissed at the pedestrians, and then the next day you're a pedestrian.
You're
and
the
you can't
pedestrian.
believe everybody
That's
wants
funny.
to kill you,
That's very funny. Yeah,
it is. And that too is a little bit of the divine, but it is kind of fascinating that Hachnasat Orchim, although it's on top of the list, it is associated with other things. In Mishnah Torah, in mourning 14, Maimonides says, it is a positive commandment of rabbinic origin to visit the sick, comfort mourners, to prepare for a funeral, prepare a bride, accompany guests, attend to all the needs of the burial, carry a corpse on one's shoulders, walk before the bier, mourn, dig a grave, bury the dead, bring joy to a bride. These are deeds of kindness that one carries out with a person, and they have no limit. And he does base it, as you said before, on love your neighbor like yourself. And I think part of that is at every stage, every one of us is going to mourn at one point in our life. And every one of us is going to have someone mourning for us at a stage in our life. And it goes on, the reward one receives for accompanying guests is greater than all of the others. This is a statute which Abraham, our patriarch, instituted, and the path of kindness which he would follow. He would feed wayfarers, provide them with drink, and accompany them. Showing hospitality for guests perceives receiving the divine presence. So it is just so fascinating. And, I don't know, we talk about some of these things as so iconic and so seminal to our religion and our culture and our heritage. It truly is reflected in the fact that it's Abraham and that we are the children of Abraham. And these are kind of just habits and minhagim that we have developed. One of my favorite, the concept of the very last verse, where Abraham then accompanies the guests out and says goodbye to them. I learned, and I don't know where I learned it from, there was a great Musernik named Eliyahu Dessler, and there's a story that I was able to find that revolved around him and my mashkiach, Shlomo Volba. But what I do whenever a guest leaves, I just don't close the door behind them. I walk out with them. And I learned that mitzvah from somebody, and it's clearly from Abraham, that this is a soup to nuts mitzvah, that you beg them to come in and you accompany them out. And that custom, if you've ever heard of it, or if you decide tonight that you want to take it upon yourself, it comes from the last verse that we quoted with Abraham. It's truly amazing. There's another concept of tzeda laderech that every Jewish mother knows. As you leave the house, you don't leave empty-handed. You have to take something with you because, God forbid, you might get hungry on the way to the subway or on the way home. And we also learn that from Joseph in Genesis 42. But these are they not minhagim, customs, cultural tics that are so baked into the Jewish DNA?
They definitely are. I mean, and this, we learn, that's, you talk about why we review the parsha every week. We read the same, every year. I mean, we read the same parsha every single year because we need reminders that these things are fundamental. And that's the purpose. The purpose of Vayera is to remind us that this is fundamental.
Another custom, and I don't know whether it happens anymore, but, I have a memory of going to a shtibel where people would fight over who gets the guest. You would see someone who was not recognizable as a member of the community, and you would try to be just like Abraham, as I said before, in the shuk, trying to parlay his hospitality over anybody else's. I Googled that and found a great story with Rav Soloveitchik arguing with somebody else over who would get a guest for their Passover Seder. And when he lost, he goes, well, it's a machloket l'shem shemayim. But that too, that is baked into, I'm sure, Jewish literature, but in culture, maybe some of that we've lost a little bit. But the idea of even when it comes to a Sheva Brachot, you can't have one of the parties for the 7 days after a wedding without Panim Chadashot, new people. This concept of welcoming, of sharing, of your joy and your wealth and your goodness with someone else is just so profound. And we get it from Abraham. We get it from these few verses.
It's great. I mean, you're passionate about it, and you're right. We forget sometimes because we take it for granted that this story is so famous. But like, wow, this story is a wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's truly amazing, and obviously, when I was watching CNN at the beginning of the war, and I think it was probably before the absolute immensity of the attack, especially of those kids at the dance rave, had baked in, and they were interviewing a girl, and she was clearly kind of very mystical, very spiritual, and she was talking, and at one point, and I was sure that YouTube or somebody would have it, but at one point she said, we Israelis, when something bad happens anywhere in the world, we jump on a plane and we go to help. And then she says, and the Americans are kind of like that, and they protect. And she goes, and the Arabs, they believe in welcoming guests into their tent. And what her point was, can't we all, instead of looking at the negative, find those core positive things that we have? And then she actually spoke a few words of Arabic. I'm finding more and more that even the most idealistic, pacifist people, at this point, maybe we've passed that mark, but she hadn't passed it yet. And of course, what she touched upon is that truly, if you look at Arabic society, Islamic society, and one was to ask, what is the most important core thing? It's welcoming the guest. There are stories about people at war, but if you come as a guest, you're welcomed in. And I in the notes that are connected to here, literally I have the verses from the Quran that talk about the requirement of touching, and it talks about charity for wealth to relatives, orphans, the poor, needy, travelers, beggars, and freeing captives, as it may be. And then I have the verses about Abraham, our story, as reflected in the Quran. And one of the fascinating things, and this is a tick I think we're all aware of, if you get invited into an Arab home, you better make sure you eat the food. If you don't eat the food, it's considered a cultural slap in the face. And so if you read the verses from the Quran, I have a little commentary there where it talks about the conflict that the angels had because they were being fed food by Abraham, but angels don't eat. So they didn't want to insult him, so they pretended to eat. And sure enough, in our Rashi on Genesis 18, it says, and they did eat. They appear to be eating. From this, we may learn that a man should not act differently than the prevalent custom. So it's a slightly different message, but I think both traditions are coming from the same source and coming from the same cultural milieu, that welcoming guests is critical, and that if a guest doesn't act as though they're being welcomed, it's a social slap in the face. It's just fascinating. I mean, we're a long way from getting back together right now. We have a lot to get over, but it is fascinating that as the children of Abraham, we do have this core belief, and you would hope that one day we can build on it.
It's nice. You say we're a people of hope. We're a people of optimism, right? Our national anthem is Hatikva. And I think it's especially important during this difficult period to have moments when we allow ourselves to be optimistic.
Well, I think Ben-Gurion said something about to be a realist, you have to be an optimist. but
you have to believe. Yeah, right. You have to be an optimist. Yeah, I think he also said you have to believe in miracles, right? To be a realist in Israel, you have to believe in miracles.
But what I will say is that we need religion to play a positive, not a negative role. on all sides, because there's no question a lot of hatred is associated with religion. And here is something, welcoming the stranger, that I think that has the potential. It's a deep-seated belief, and that potentially we could build on. Just getting back to this trait of a child of Abraham, later on in the Parshiot, when we have a question of, I think it's Rachel, whether she is appropriate as a wife, when she offers water for the camels. It says, therefore they knew that she was right, and Rashi says, fit for him since she will be charitable and will therefore be worthy of admission into the house of Abraham. So the idea was, this was the character trait that was used to identify someone who was compatible with the children of Israel, more than a belief system, more than anything else. So I want to kind of segue into what's happening in Israel today. And as I said in the beginning, 250,000 Israelis have been moved, displaced, whether in the south or in the north. And the story of what is happening with them is coming out of the press every day, how the people of Israel are rising to the occasion. I mean, one of the first stories I heard was that all of these wonderful restaurants in Tel Aviv started cooking meals and food to give and to send and to ship to the displaced people. And obviously some of those Tel Aviv kitchens were not exactly kosher. And when they saw that their food was not being delivered, they went to the Rabbanut, and unlike normal, where the Rabbanut in Israel finds ways to say no, they found ways to say yes. They sent people into the kitchens, and within a day, they helped them make kosher food. Here's a small example of how the people across all tribes and distinctions are getting together in Israel. There's an organization, and I am the head of an organization called PEF, Israel Endowment Funds, and we are sending millions and millions of dollars to Israel, and some of that is to organizations that have been around forever, and some of them are being created as we speak by tech people, by creative people. There's one organization, it's called Daybreak, and what they've done is they've kind of set up a social help fund where they will fund people who come with ideas. And I want to share you some of the ideas that they're being approached with. Now, there's the obvious. They're providing activities for kids, shopping for medications, providing emotional support meetings for these people that have been dropped at their doorstep into their neighborhood. But there was one baker who said, there are kids who are displaced, who are having birthdays, and I want to make sure that every one of those kids has a birthday cake. So she sent out a what's up or a fund me notice. She now has 130 pastry chefs who are not only baking birthday cakes, but delivering them around the country to kids. There are Haredim, we're hearing stories, who are, number one, signing up to the IDF because they feel they have a part to play. They're being protected. But there are others. I mean, we know about Zakah, when you see these people who are going in to identify the corpses through DNA and others, and then to provide a burial. That's why I mentioned before, in terms of Hachnasat Orchim, part and parcel of that is giving the basic services that all of us one day will be on the other side of the coin. coin. It's called Chesed Shel Emet. And so there's a group called Shiva Call Operation. Not only are they involved they help set up Shiva, there are people who are mourning whose family is dispersed, whose sons are in the army, and the Haredim are finding ways that they can contribute. There's another program to provide strictly kosher and vegan meals for the evacuees in front lines. I mean, I said before, Rabbi, I'm starting to see on Israeli TV the casualties of this war. And, they're 19 and 20. And clearly the front troops are those young kids who are in the real army. But the reserves are there too. And these are reserves that come from every part of Israeli life. And Israel, as we know, is a very cosmopolitan country. There are people who are vegans. There are people who are, as they said, the Haredim are strictly kosher. So all of these different organizations are popping up. One of the ones that your wife brought to our attention is started at a university, at a college in Jerusalem, the Shalem College, and it's called the Jerusalem Civilian Command. There are 4,000 volunteers and a waiting list of another 5,000. They provide counseling and housing, babysitting for orphans and widowed parents, distribute donated food, toys, and clothing to refugees. These are people, and we're going to listen at the end with a recording of one person describing how a program such as this was organized with spreadsheets and schedules and what's up messaging. This is a rising of the Israelis in a situation that unfortunately is caused because the government just is not there, was not there. But here is a shining example of these children of Abraham who are doing these amazing things. And I think that gives us a lot of hope.
It really, really does. I mean, these what you're describing is really God's work. People are doing these kinds of work for these people who have been displaced and the soldiers and their families. And there are so many people who need things in Israel. And that's like we said, yesterday people were set and today they're guests. Today they're in need of things.
So I am going to finish. It's a 6-minute recording. It's from another podcast. It is called Promised Podcast. A friend of mine, Noah Ephron, is the one who organizes it. And at the end of this podcast, which is very left-leaning, he happens to be a professor at Bar Ilan, they have what is called Vada Country. And each of the participants talks about what happened to them this past week that blew them away. And I am going to just play in total his description of what happened when people in his Tel Aviv neighborhood looked across the street and saw buses in front of a hotel with people that had been relocated from the South. I think it's fascinating. I think if you like it, I hope you listen to the Promise podcast. But in any case, I think you'll be inspired. And I think it truly is in the spirit of Abraham. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to play this, and I will see you all next week. Here we go.
Okay.
So a week ago last Friday, 6 days after the attack, my friend Marilyn noticed on the way back home from somewhere that there were buses in front of the Grand Beach Hotel across the way from our apartment. Marilyn lives around the corner, and this is the kind of person Marilyn is, though she probably wouldn't say so. Having seen the buses, she walked into the lobby to ask, and then someone told her that the buses had just come with maybe 300 people between them, 180 of them kids from down south, Ashkelon and Ofakim mostly, not cities where Hamas people with guns and grenades had rampaged and murdered, but cities where lots of missiles landed with their 45-second heads up, and cities where lots of apartments do not have rocket-safe fortified rooms. And in the event, these 300 people were family members of police officers who were now working around the clock. So someone had the good idea of moving the spouses, mostly wives, and the kids up to a hotel in Tel Aviv, and the hotel that they got was the Grand Beach. Now, our neighborhood, like a lot of neighborhoods, has a neighborhood WhatsApp group. It's on the nosedly called Kfutza Shchunatit, or neighborhood group, with 189 members, almost all of them from basically the 2 square blocks that is our home turf. And you use the group mostly to give away stuff or to get stuff that other people are giving away. Or when the girl was getting married and we needed lots of chairs, I posted, and in 4 minutes I had 20 chairs. And you also post when your internet has gone down to see if it's just you or the whole neighborhood, and if you need a babysitter, stuff like that. And at 3:20 in the afternoon on Friday, October 13th, Marilyn posted a post that read, quote, "Dear neighbors, lots of people came over the last few hours from the south and also the north to the Grand Beach Hotel. They still seem in organizational disarray, and the police officers outside said they seem to have everything they need. They suggested, though, that maybe we should come back to talk to them and to listen and just be with them. I will go back in the next couple of hours to check out what's happening, and I will update you. In hopes of a quiet Shabbat, namaste emoji," end quote. A few minutes after that, someone posted a photo from above of 3 rats in a cage with a note that said, quote, "3 rats were saved from a settlement outside Gaza. Anyone interested in adopting them or know someone interested in adopting," end quote. At 3:37, someone named Sharon Shlomi posted to the group, quote, "I just got back now from the Grand Beach Hotel. They would be happy for activities for kids and adults, and also for a reflexologist, for massages, for pedicures and manicures, and for a hairstylist. And they need lunch for the kids because they only get breakfast and dinner from the hotel. Their contact woman is Sapir. Here is her number," end quote. A little after that, Sahar Bar Nissan posted this: "Hi, at the Grand Beach Hotel there are no lunches. Today is taken care of and I am beginning to organize tomorrow. We thought maybe pasta with no milk, hot dogs and sliced vegetables, tomatoes and cucumbers. It's the simplest and most convenient. Write me if you can help." Marilyn posted a picture of a bunch of bags of macaroni, and under that were the words, "I have lots of pasta that I bought for this purpose for whomever can prepare a large amount of it." And Yaeli Kassan replied, "Me," and so did lots of other people. At 8:57 that evening, Sahar Bar Nissan posted a link to a new WhatsApp group called Lunches for the Grand Beach, and 99 people joined the group. What they found when they did were Google Doc sign-up sheets that Sahar had made so they could put themselves down to prepare this or that meal, or to serve this or that meal, or to clean up from this or that meal. Sahar became the point woman, though Marilyn, Yaeli Kassan, and a bunch of others also developed relationships with the families in the hotel, and over the next days, as time passed, other needs kept cropping up. A laundry detail was set up to take people's dirty clothes and wash them, dry, and return them. Having done this once, Marilyn last week got a phone call from one of the women staying in the hotel who said, "Hi, my daughter just came back from the Army. Can you do her laundry and have it ready for when she needs to go back into the Army?" Marilyn could in the event. Some of the kids in the Grand Beach every so often wanted falafel, and the place on the corner, Moshe and Sons, said they'd sell it cheap, a shekel a ball, for the people in the hotel. So Sahar set up a pay box so people could kick in a few shekels every so often, so 300 falafel balls could be brought in a tray to the hotel. And something like that also got boxes and boxes of pizza, too, every so often. Everything was kosher, which was a source of worry for some of the people making food in their unkosher homes, who in any case were vague about the rules, something about milk or meat. I went to the hotel myself 3 times as a Sherpa, twice for Susan taking overflow stuff she'd made, pasta and popcorn, in the event, and once last Shabbat toting over quiches and casseroles that Marilyn had made and passed to us to heat up on our blech on Shabbat morning, because her blech was filled with other food she made for people at the Grand Beach, so all of it would be hot for lunch. Every time I Sherpa'd to the Grand Beach, Sahar was there giving curt instructions and asking curt questions. "Put that there. If this challah remains uneaten, do you need it back? Come back in an hour to get the pot," that sort of thing. I don't really know Sahar, who is Marilyn's next-door neighbor, but she occupies a big place in my imagination because very often when I walk Lucy the dog through the yard late at night, she is there, sometimes on the north end, sitting alone at a little table she's set up, drinking coffee, looking thoughtful, and sometimes on the south end of the yard, sitting on the steps, smoking a cigarette, looking thoughtful. And I developed an image of her as an existentialist, thinking deep thoughts between sips and puffs. But for these past 2 weeks, Sahar has been more like the COO of a big corporation. Clipped efficiency spreadsheets, seeing the big picture and the details all at once, and bearing the weight of the entire operation on her own thin shoulders. Late last night, I got from Sahar through the WhatsApp group the spreadsheet for today, for the lunch being served right now, in fact, as we're recording this, which shows that Sahar herself is signed up for the 100 portions of vegetarian shawarma in pita. Mirit is bringing hummus, trina, olives, and pickles. Irit is bringing a tray of sliced vegetables. Marilyn and Aviva are on the setup and cleanup crew, and Aviva is bringing dessert. 350 falafel balls will be purchased by people who are to deposit money by Paybox, which was the least I could do, and as usual, I did exactly the least I could do. The other day, the folks at the hotel gave the people who had been bringing the lunches, each of them, an orchid. Marilyn showed me the note that came with hers. It said, "Thank you very much for your kindness and generosity. Signed, the families of the Israeli police, Grand Beach Hotel, Tel Aviv." Marilyn said she cried when she got it. She said, "You don't understand. We did this because we needed to do it." But I did understand. And what I understood is needing to do this day in, day out with people your only link to whom is they happen to show up in buses at the hotel that happens to be across the street. I understood that this is a very beautiful thing. Marilyn said, Sahar said that every week for 9 months, she's been going to the protests at Kaplan, where for a lot of them, the police, they were kind of the enemy. And here she is, up till late at night, every night for weeks, making lists and making food for the families of the police. It's a hell of a thing, isn't it? Sahar said. And she is right. It is a hell of a thing.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Geoffrey.
All the best.